Did you know that nearly 70% of poor motorcycle performance comes down to one misunderstood component? The carburetor. But what is a carburetor exactly? Today, I'm breaking down 9 symptoms of a bad motorcycle carburetor, plus the 3 fast fixes that can save you hundreds at the shop. So, what's a carburetor? It's the device that mixes air and fuel in the perfect ratio, typically 14.7 parts air to 1 part fuel, then sends that mix to your cylinders for combustion. Get that ratio wrong and your bike won't run right. Get it really wrong and your bike won't run at all. Vintage bike, cruiser, dual sport, or dirt bike. If you're not riding a fuel-injected machine, you've got a carburetor. It sits between your air filter and your intake manifold, quietly doing its job every single time you twist the throttle. So let's dive into the 9 warning signs your carburetor is failing, and the 3 simple fixes that solve most carb problems before you waste money on expensive repairs. Symptom 1. Strange sounds. First red flag. Your bike starts making weird noises. Not the good kind of mechanical symphony you're used to, but popping sounds from the exhaust, banging noises on deceleration, or even a sneezing coughing sound coming from the carbs themselves. Here's what those sounds mean. Popping and banging typically happen during deceleration and indicate unburned fuel igniting in your exhaust system. Sneezing or backfiring through the carburetor means your air-fuel mixture is off, usually too lean, and combustion is happening at the wrong time or in the wrong place. These aren't just annoying sounds. They're your bike telling you something is wrong with the fuel delivery system. Popping on decel can be relatively harmless if it's mild, but loud banging and sneezing are serious warnings that your carb is out of balance or there's an air leak somewhere in the system. Running with lean pops, chuck sneezes, cooks gaskets and valves. Keep it up and you're into parts and labor fast. Exhaust gaskets and intake boots $80 to $300. Valve work $300 to $800. Don't let noise be your first bill. Sometimes the fix is as simple as syncing your carbs or adjusting the mixture screws. We'll get to those fast fixes at the end, but for now, just know that those sneezes come from a lean mix. And that same lean mix stops being loud and starts being dangerous. Your engine runs hot and fragile. Symptom 2. Running lean. This means your engine is getting too much air and not enough fuel. You'll notice that sneezing, coughing sound we talked about, and your engine may feel weak, hesitant, or unresponsive when you crack the throttle. Running lean is dangerous for your engine. Lean mixtures burn hotter than rich mixtures, and excessive heat can damage pistons, valves, and cylinders. Over time, a lean condition can lead to seized pistons, burned valves, and catastrophic engine failure. So what causes a lean condition? A few things. Clogged jets inside the carburetor restrict fuel flow. Air leaks in the intake boots allow extra air to sneak into the engine, or the float level is set too low, so the carb isn't getting enough fuel to begin with. Here's how you can tell if you're running lean. Your spark plugs will be white or light gray instead of a healthy tan color. Your exhaust pipes might have a bluish tint from the excessive heat. And your engine will run rough, especially at low RPM or during acceleration. If you suspect you're running lean, don't keep riding. The longer you run lean, the more damage you're doing to your engine. Pop off the carbs, inspect the jets for clogs, check your intake boots for cracks, and adjust your mixture screws to richen things up. Lean heat is brutal. Burned valves and piston damage push repairs into $800 to $1,500, and full top-end work climbs past $2,000. A 30-minute jet clean and float check can save all of that. Fix lean fast, because many riders overcorrect and drown the mix. That's why we need to talk about the next symptoms, which is caused by the same carb problem, but you can see it when it happens and smell it too. Symptom 3. Black smoke from the exhaust. Now let's flip to the opposite problem. Black smoke pouring out of your exhaust. It simply means the mixture is rich. That is too much fuel and not enough air. You will see thick sooty exhaust and you will smell raw gas, especially at startup or when you blip the throttle. The common causes are simple: A stuck float or needle lets fuel overfill the bowl. A clogged air filter chokes airflow. Mixture screws that are turned too far out add even more fuel. And diagnosis is quick. Pull a spark plug. Black, wet, and sooty means rich. Shine a light into the tailpipe. Heavy carbon confirms it. If your carb has a bowl sight window, watch the fuel level, a level that creeps high points to float or needle trouble. Also check the air filter. If it is dark and packed with dirt, it is restricting air. But running rich is not harmless. It wastes fuel, fouls plugs which cost $10 to $30, washes oil off the cylinder walls, thins the oil, and can kill the catalytic converter if your bike has one which costs $600 to $1,200. It also leaves black soot on the pipes and the fender. Fix the basics first. Replace a clogged air filter. Free and reseat the float needle. Verify float height. Clean the main and pilot jets. Then reset the mixture screws to the factory baseline, which is often 1.5 to 2.5 turns out. Adjust slightly in until the smoke clears. Fresh plugs help the engine light cleanly once the mixture is corrected. Typical cost is $10 to $60 for a cleaner, a filter, and small parts. That is far cheaper than wasting fuel. And once plugs are loaded and the mix is off, the engine quits playing along, but starting could become your new fight. Symptom 4. Refusing to start. You hit the starter button, the engine cranks, and cranks, and cranks some more, but it won't fire up, or maybe it fires for a second, then dies immediately. You try again and again, but the bike just refuses to start. On carb bikes, especially ones that sat, this is classic fuel delivery trouble. Varnished jets, a stuck float, or a leaking needle can all block proper fuel flow. With clogged passages, the pilot circuit cannot feed idle. With a float stuck closed, the bowl never fills. With a float stuck open, the engine floods. Do not buy a battery or a coil yet. Misdiagnosis can waste $200 to $600 very fast. Start with fuel. Sniff the exhaust. Raw gas hints at flooding. Pull a plug. Wet means too rich. Chalky or very light means you may be lean. Open the bowl drain. If nothing flows, fuel is not reaching the carb. Here is the fix that works. Remove the carb strip completely. Soak the pilot jet, the main jet, the emulsion tube, and all idle passages in carb cleaner. Blow every orifice with compressed air, and wear eye protection. Inspect and clean the float needle and seat. Set float height to the service spec. Reassemble carefully with a fresh bowl gasket if needed. Refit the carb, prime the bowls, and set the mixture screws at the baseline, which is often 1.5 to 2.5 turns out. Fine-tune once the engine is warm. Costs are clear. A tow is $100 to $300 if you get stranded. A proper do-it-yourself clean is $10 to $40 for solvent and small gaskets. Fresh plugs are $10 to $30 if they were fouled. For storage, run the carb dry or add fuel stabilizer. That stops varnish before it forms. Plus, the same dirty circuits also create timing and mixture errors that explode as backfires. It is loud, dramatic, and costly. If this is helping, like and subscribe so you don't miss the fixes and our next videos just like this. Symptom 5. The bike backfires. You're riding along, you close the throttle, and bang! A loud explosion from the exhaust or the intake. Or maybe you're trying to start the bike and it backfires through the carburetor with a loud pop that can blow off the air filter if you're unlucky. Backfiring happens when combustion occurs at the wrong time or in the wrong place. It's almost always caused by an incorrect air-fuel mixture, either too lean or too rich, combined with improper ignition timing. Exhaust backfiring on deceleration is usually caused by a lean condition. When you close the throttle quickly, the engine suddenly gets a huge gulp of air and not enough fuel. That lean mixture doesn't burn completely in the cylinder, so it ignites in the hot exhaust system instead, causing that loud pop or bang. Intake backfiring, where the explosion comes back through the carburetor, is usually caused by incorrect ignition timing or a stuck intake valve. It's less common, but it's way more dangerous because it can cause a fire if there's fuel vapor near the carburetor. Backfiring isn't just annoying, it's a sign that your air-fuel mixture is way off and needs immediate attention. Repeated bangs can blow exhaust gaskets, crack pipes, or torch airboxes. $150 to $400 before you even touch the carb. Sealing leaks and setting mix beats buying metal. The fix depends on the cause. If it's decel popping from a lean condition, richen up your mixture, or check for air leaks. If it's intake backfiring, check your ignition timing and inspect your valves. Either way, backfiring is a symptom you can't ignore, and those mix errors don't just pop. They sap power, which is why overall performance falls flat, and who wants to ride a motorcycle like that? Symptom 6. Poor engine performance. Your bike used to pull hard. Now it feels sluggish, gutless, and unresponsive. Acceleration is weak. Fuel economy has tanked. Riding feels like a chore instead of a thrill. Poor engine performance is one of the most common symptoms of a dirty or improperly adjusted carburetor. Even a slightly off air fuel ratio can cause noticeable drops in power and efficiency. Too much air means weak combustion and less power. Too much fuel means wasted gas and poor throttle response. Here's the thing: carburetors are precision devices. They rely on tiny jets with tiny holes to meter fuel accurately. Over time, those jets get clogged with varnish, dirt, and debris from old fuel. Even a partial clog can throw off your mixture enough to hurt performance. Riders often chase performance issues by checking spark plugs, adjusting valves, cleaning air filters, and changing oil. All good maintenance, but if the carb is dirty or out of tune, none of that will fix the underlying problem. The parts canon wastes $200 to $600 on coils and sensors, while a $20 jet kit fixes it. Don't fund guesswork. The solution is straightforward. Clean your carburetor thoroughly at least once a year, or more often if you ride frequently or use ethanol fuel, which gums up carbs faster. Remove the jets, soak them in carb cleaner, blow them out with compressed air, and reassemble everything carefully. Then fine-tune your air-fuel mixture. Most carbs have mixture screws that let you adjust the fuel delivery at idle and low throttle. Start with the factory setting, usually 1.5 to 2.5 turns out from fully seated, and adjust from there based on how the bike runs. A clean, properly tuned carburetor will transform your bike's performance. You'll get your power back, your throttle response will be crisp, and your fuel economy will improve. Symptom 7. High idling. You sit at a light and the engine screams. The tach shows 2,500 to 3,000 RPM, when normal idle is 1,000 to 1,200. You have not touched the throttle, but the bike sounds ready to leap. Common causes are a lean mixture, a tight or sticky throttle cable, return springs that do not pull the butterflies closed, or a vacuum leak at the intake boots. Sometimes the idle screw is set too high. High idling isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. An engine that revs high at idle can lurch forward unexpectedly if you accidentally bump the bike into gear. It also makes the bike harder to control in slow-speed situations like parking lots or tight turns. Costs stay low if you act early. Cables, boots, and springs are usually $15 to $100. Ignore it, and a sudden lurch can tip the bike and damage parts. That is a rabbit hole no one wants to deal with. The fix? Start by checking your throttle cable for smooth operation and proper slack. Then inspect the carburetor's throttle springs and butterfly valves. If everything looks good there, check for vacuum leaks by spraying carb cleaner around the intake boots while the engine is running. If the idle speed changes, you've found your leak. Replace any worn or damaged parts, and adjust your idle speed screw to bring the RPM back down to spec. Problem solved. Symptom 8. Cold start complications. On a cold morning, the engine cranks, fires for a second, then quits. Cold air is dense, so your mixture goes lean right when the engine needs extra fuel. The choker enrichment circuit should supply that extra fuel. If the choke cable sticks, the plunger is dirty. or the passage is clogged, the enriched circuit fails. A partly clogged pilot jet will do the same because it feeds idle and just off idle. The fix: start by making sure your choke mechanism is working properly. Pull the choke lever and verify that the plunger inside the carburetor is actually moving. If it's not, clean or replace the choke assembly. Next, pull the carburetor and clean the pilot jet thoroughly. It's the smallest jet in the carb and it clogs easily. Use a fine wire or a dedicated jet cleaning tool to make sure the passage is completely clear. Finally, consider slightly enriching your mixture for winter riding. You can do this by adjusting the mixture screws out slightly, about a quarter turn richer, or by installing slightly larger pilot jets if you live in a consistently cold climate. A stuck choke or clogged pilot jets are $10 to $40 fixes, but crank it long enough and you'll drain batteries and wash oil. That is around $80 to $150 more. Cold starts don't have to be a nightmare. With a clean, properly functioning carburetor and a working choke system, your bike should fire up reliably even on freezing mornings. Symptom 9. Flooded carburetor. You try to start your bike and it won't fire. You smell gas. Strong gas. You look down and see fuel dripping out of the carburetor overflow tubes onto the ground. Your bike has flooded. Flooding soaks plugs and can dilute oil, but fresh plugs are around $10 to $30, and an oil change can cost you around $30 to $60. A flooded carburetor happens when too much fuel enters the carburetor bowl and overflows into the engine, or out of the overflow tubes. The most common cause is a stuck float, or a worn float needle valve that won't seal properly. Here's how it works. Inside your carburetor is a float, kind of like the float in a toilet tank, that rises and falls with the fuel level. When the fuel reaches the correct level, the float pushes up on a needle valve that shuts off fuel flow. But if the float gets stuck, or if the needle valve wears out and won't seal, fuel keeps flowing into the bowl until it overflows. A flooded carburetor makes your bike nearly impossible to start because the engine is getting way too much fuel and not enough air. The spark plugs get soaked with raw gasoline and they can't create a spark strong enough to ignite anything. The immediate fix? Turn off your fuel petcock to stop more fuel from entering the carburetor. Then open the throttle fully and crank the engine with the ignition off to clear out the excess fuel. Once you've cleared the cylinders, close the throttle, turn the ignition back on, and try starting the bike normally. The long-term fix: pull the carburetor, disassemble it, and inspect the float and needle valve. Clean everything thoroughly. Check the float for damage. If it has a tiny crack or hole, it can fill with fuel and sink, which causes flooding. Replace the float if it's damaged, and replace the needle valve and seat if they show any wear. Flooding is messy, frustrating, and dangerous because raw fuel on a hot engine is a fire hazard, but it's fixable with basic carburetor maintenance. The 3 fast fixes. Alright, now that you know the 9 symptoms, let's talk about the 3 fast fixes that solve most carburetor problems without tearing the bike apart. Fix 1. Clean your carburetor thoroughly. Most carb problems come from dirt, varnish, and clogged jets. Pull the carb, disassemble it completely, soak all the metal parts in carburetor cleaner, and blow out every jet and passage with compressed air. This single fix solves starting problems, running issues, and performance loss. Fix 2. Adjust your air-fuel mixture. Most carburetors have mixture screws that let you fine-tune fuel delivery. Start with the factory setting, usually 1.5 to 2.5 turns out from fully seated. Then adjust based on how the bike runs. If it's popping and running lean, richen it up by turning the screws out. If it's smoking and running rich, lean it out by turning them in. Fix 3. Sync your carburetors. If you have multiple carburetors, they need to be synchronized so each cylinder gets the same amount of air and fuel. Use a carb sync tool, either a vacuum gauge set or a homemade manometer, to balance the throttle openings. This fix eliminates rough idling, vibration, and uneven power delivery. Those 3 fixes, cleaning, adjusting, and syncing, will solve 90% of carburetor problems without expensive parts or complicated repairs. Now, if the carb checks out but still starts to drag, your battery is the next suspect. So click on the next video where we expose the symptoms of bad motorcycle battery only mechanics know. Hit that subscribe button. Your bike will thank you. And tell us in the comments what problems your bike's had. We might feature it in an upcoming video.